Health Unabashed, broadcasting live on Healthcare Now Radio. Health Unabashed is where healthcare meets innovation, insight, and impact. We engage top industry minds to explore the future of health and wellness. I'm Greg Masters, co-host and executive producer, alongside my partner in conversation, the ever-curious digital health aficionado, author, editor, global thought leader, and industry steward, Gil Bashe. Together, we bring you the people, ideas, and movements reshaping healthcare, not with hype, but with purpose and persistence. On today's special episode, Gil sits with Ed Marx, one of healthcare's leading voices in digital transformation. A forward-thinking voice for digital innovation, Ed Marx is a best-selling author, health IT veteran, and founder and CEO of the Marx Advisory Group. In this conversation, Ed pulls back the curtain on the hype and realities of healthcare's digital transformation, shares real-world insights on aligning technology and value-based care and enhancing the patient experience, and advocates for the role of digital innovation as a tool to empower both caregivers and patients. A former global CIO and Army medic, Ed now commands global attention as a digital health thought leader on stage and online. Learn more about Ed's work at marxadvisory.com, and that's M-A-R-X, at Marx Tango on Twitter, and you can follow him at Instagram and LinkedIn as well. Now, with no further ado, Gil, the mic is yours.
Greg, thank you so much for that gracious introduction, as always. I appreciate this. I think this is a show that you and many others are going to appreciate very much so, because we have with us Ed Marx, who is really so well known by the health information innovation community. He's a keynote speaker at Vive and Health and many, many meetings for many important reasons. Ed is a power presence in our sector. He is one of the few people who has had the role as Chief Information Officer of a major academic medical center, Cleveland Clinic, and transcended the role of CIO to really become, in a way, the Chief Strategy Officer of Information Systems for one of the nation's most respected medical systems. And beyond that, Ed has demonstrated himself to be a great advisor. As a matter of fact, right now he's principal of the Marx Advisory, which serves companies of all different sizes, medical institutions, provider centers, startup companies, and so forth. He has been a demonstrated leader of our industry. He's been CEO of companies. He's stepped in to get them going, given them a sense of vision and purpose. He is a noted author. As a matter of fact, I have his books here, 2 books that he's authored, plus a special working pamphlet. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Ed has also been very, very visible about his own health journey. Sometimes we think of ourselves in this sector as sort of above the fray of disease. And we learn we are not by any means. We are actually, we're always people, we're sometimes patients, but sometimes we're patients. Yeah. And Ed has been very, very candid about his journey as a patient, combined to his having been a C-suite executive in a major medical academic center. Being a patient is a different side of the table. And also, he and his wife, who is a doctor of nursing, and has a very, very her own unique visible voice, has often been Ed's partner in talking about the health system. So, Ed, welcome to Health Unabashed.
Wow. Well, Gil, thank you so much. And Greg, thank you so much for having me. It's truly a treat. You all are inspirations to me. And so I feel super honored to have this time with you. Thank you.
Well, it's very, very mutual. Ed, you have just written a very, very important book, co-authored a book, and I wanted to get into that. You've written a book for consumers.
Yes.
And most of the time when we're writing books, we're really writing them for our industry counterparts, those of us in this space. There's a few friends of ours, like John White of WebMD, who writes for the consumer, and he does some great stuff. You've written a different book for the consumer, and I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about that book and why.
Yeah, very happy to. So it is called Diagnosed, and it really is a hand that the consumer can hold through their healthcare journey. And I have to give a credit to Mayo Clinic Press specifically on the angle of that book, because originally the book was being written by Chris Ross, who at the time was CIO of Mayo and I was CIO of Cleveland. We both had these catastrophic healthcare situations happen to us. We're both healed now, thankfully.
Thank goodness.
And we were like, wow, it really is different on the other side. We hear that intellectually, but you never know it till you're laying on that table and you're staring the Reaper, the Grim Reaper in the eye, you know? So it became real to us. We're going to write his book on, patient experience for our colleagues, to your point earlier, Gil. And so we started down that road, and then Mayo Clinic, they were like, you know what? This has been done before. It really hasn't helped much. So let's not write to ourselves. Let's write this book for the public so that they can have a great experience despite their hospital. And we were like, yes, of course, like kind of like a duh moment, like we should have thought of that ourselves. And so we started rewriting the book. It was about a quarter of the way done at that time, and rewriting specifically for the consumer. And it's been a great hit. So many people have given us feedback how they've benefited from the book. And so it's really made its way around all over the world. And so it feels really good because we just felt this ethical obligation to get the word out on, how to ensure you have a good experience and don't always count and trust the hospital, the health systems to have your best interest.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I think there's two aspects here that I'm thinking of. One is, I don't think as leaders we want to be thought of as also vulnerable people. That we seem to go out into these conferences and step onto the stage and smile and wave and sort of point at nifty slides and and speak to colleagues as if we're kind of above it a little bit. And all of a sudden, when we confront the fact that we're drawn into the operating room, the follow-ups, whether it's operation or radiation or whatever the case may be, and suddenly we realize, hey, I'm in the thick of it, just like all these other people in the waiting room.
Yeah.
And we're seeing ourselves waiting to be seen. Doctors have a few moments with us. They come in, they're standing, they don't sit down, they don't sort of say, how's your family? How are you doing? Like, what are you accounting? What can I do for you? Are you having problems with the system? It's really set up to have, at best, even if they know you, they're trying to sort of like manage their time, and they're judged by their system by how many of Ed Marx's can they see in the course of a day, and bill for that. And it makes it it's almost like going to the dry cleaner. Are my shirts going to be on hangers and pressed in time for my big meeting? And that's medicine in this country. I mean, what's Ed, it's a fascinating topic. If you were to sort of say, hey, my three biggest points of advice on diagnosed is X, Y, and Z, what could you share with us?
Yeah, let me give you the one-liner for the whole book, and then I'm going to give you three things that you asked for. But one is, after all the research that we did and all the focus groups that we did and thinking of our own experiences and things like that, we realized that experience is never the reason for a patient's successful or not successful outcome, but is the accelerator of either. So experience is super critical. And so what we try to do is equip the reader with very practical things that they can do, and none of them cost money. And so three that come to the top of my head that we always talk about is we really remind them that ultimately the buck starts and stops with them. A lot of times in healthcare, we want to give the responsibility to the clinician, but you cannot trust the clinician to do that. Not because they're bad people or not trustworthy, but because, as you shared, they're dealing with 1,000 different patients and 1,000 different things in their own lives. You've got to take ownership of what's happening. Now, if you can't, because in some cases you literally can't because you're incapacitated one way or another, you'll have a proxy for you that you establish in advance. But ultimately, you've got to take ownership. Just because a doctor tells you you should do this treatment, ask why. Make sure you know why they're suggesting that treatment. If they're referring you to a buddy, why that buddy? Is it a college buddy? Is it someone that's within their network, approved network, or is it based on clinical outcomes? You want to empower yourself. The second thing is to create a village around you before you need it. Because when you're going through a significant medical crisis, and if you're alone, you're in big trouble. And again, the medical community, as lovely as all the people are, they're not going to be there for you. They've got, again, they're seeing thousands of other patients. They've got their own lives going on. You need to create this village. What I mean by that, Gil, is to be super intentional. And so I always challenge people when I speak about this or when we write about it, is like, hey, can you tell me, identify 10 people in your life that you know for sure will be there when you need them? Because you'll never know unless you do this in advance. And so my wife and I actually did this. We call it the Texas 10. We were looking for 5 other like-minded couples. So for us, it was really based around not just our health and long-term well-being, but also our marital relationship. We want a strong marriage. We both came from broken marriages. And so we wanted to surround ourselves with 5 other couples that were trying to figure it out also, but would be there for us no matter what happens. So we found 5 diverse couples and we interviewed people. We didn't tell them exactly what the interview was for. We didn't say this is an interview, but some of the people, had you asked me, oh yeah, this person will be there for us, that person will be there, they didn't make the cut after we had like a discussion with them about, what they would do and, how committed were they really. But when I went in for my surgery, when I had cancer, the night before, those 5 couples were there. And we had this amazing celebration. We had amazing spiritual experience. Everyone has a different background, but still spiritual. And then I knew when I'm laying on that table that no matter what my outcome was, if it was a negative outcome, they had my wife. My wife would be taken care of. My family would be taken care of. And so that's what we talk about is this concept of the village. And then the third thing is to select your care team. Now, I know it's not always possible, but we have more influence than we think we do. Now, sometimes it's not possible, right? You're in an emergency situation, you're at that hospital, but oftentimes, we might be going through a cancer journey or a heart failure journey, something where we have a little bit more time. And it goes back to what I was saying a little bit earlier about taking control. It's finding out who's the best. I did that when I had my cancer surgery. They recommended a certain procedure. I ultimately went with a different procedure, and the doctors were all friends of mine. So it was kind of awkward. I had those awkward conversations. I'm not going to go with you, doctor, even though you're my best buddy, because I don't like that particular, the outcomes and everything I read about that surgical procedure. I want to go with this direction. But you've got to do that. You've got to make sure you got the best care team, and you can let people go. I mean, sometimes we're limited by our insurance policies and things like that, but we have more control than we think. So make sure you do the research. Don't go into it ignorant, because the more you arm yourself, the better outcome you're going to, again, it's going to be an accelerator of your outcome. So those are 3 things. Take accountability, ownership of the medical challenge. 2, create yourself a village ahead of time. And 3, look at your care team and recruit the very best, because you're the very best.
It's incredible counsel, incredible counsel. Ed, often people focus on your experience with Cleveland Clinic, and it's a remarkable experience. And I know that the staff there, particularly the former CEO, continues to be amazingly and unsurprisingly fond of you. And I know from your descriptor, you got your start in medicine, really, you could say from the ground floor up, or from the floor up. You started as a janitor in a medical system. You have very humble roots. I don't think people know that you came to this country also to some extent as an immigrant with your family. Holocaust survivors. We're recording this special session on Holocaust Remembrance Day as well. And I just wanted to gain some perspective, because I think our lives, the sort of the psychodynamics of our journey, influence our reaction to other people. You are known for being gracious, enthusiastic, adventurous, and bold, and receiving of other people. That's why I guess it's called the Marx Advisory. You're there for other people, just as you asked in your cancer journey for other people to be there for you. I just wanted to go back a little bit and put you on the loving spot about how your childhood, your upbringing, actually plays forward today. Because when I have the chance to interact with you and your wife at a conference or through your social media posts, they're very personal, they're very real, very transparent. How did that experience evolve? This sort of, I am who I am, and this is it. I'm an adventurer. I push myself. I'm youthful in my lifelong journey. What are the influencing factors that play on you?
Just tuning in, you're right on time for Health Unabashed on Healthcare Now Radio. We're live with Ed Marx, a former Cleveland Clinic CIO and one of healthcare's leading digital transformation strategists, discussing the future of healthcare innovation, the reality of digital transformation, and how bold leadership is redefining patient care from the ground up. Stay tuned. This episode is just getting started.
Yeah, I've thought about that a lot. It's been kind of fun as I reconnect with people I grew up with and to ask them the sort of questions like, what was I really like? Was I a jerk? What was I like? Was I nice? I do think coming from the roots that I did with my parents both being Holocaust survivors, my dad actually in a concentration camp, my mom being bombed every day for, years. And, that certainly had an impact. And we just grew up as sort of a poor family in Bavaria. And, I wore hand-me-down clothes forever and things like that. And even when we came to the United States, we were on food stamps, still hand-me-down clothes, still wore Bavarian lederhosen, for a while. We couldn't afford clothes, couldn't afford to take showers every day. I mean, you just kind of grow up, humble that way. And so you don't think too much of yourself, in a uppity up type way. And then my mom suffered quite a bit with rheumatoid arthritis through the years. She had countless surgeries all the time. And I saw her compassion and the way that she still served, the seven of us, I was the youngest of seven, and she still every day in true Bavarian fashion, cooked home meals, made beds, cleaned the house. And I just saw that service, that servant attitude, and we picked up on it. Well, we were also, put into that same thing, working really hard every day and on weekends. And so that was part of it. It's just give credit to my mom and dad and their softness in their heart. And then my mom, seeing her with all the suffering, but still loving, that certainly had a lot of influence. And I also, my time in the church also, I would read stories, about who was really rich. It wasn't the persons, the parables, the stories we read. Why wasn't the person that was rich was not who you thought, but the big bank account was the person who gave to others. They were the most rich. And so
who was content with their lots in a way.
Those stories stuck with me, and I just sort of evolved that way. And I was a janitor, as you mentioned, and so it's like I know what it's like, and I always never forget that. And so I always try to do things that keep me grounded, keep me connected, and I surround myself with people. Going back to the Texas 10, but before the Texas 10, I always try to surround myself with people who are not afraid to Ed, shake me up a little bit, that's ridiculous. Don't get too big for your britches type thing. So, things that keep me humble. And then, of course, getting sick, that brings humility. And I've been fired. That brings humility. I got a divorce one time. Oh, that brings humility. So there's things happen in life that just keep you grounded.
Yeah, it's amazing how transparent you are about those chapters of your life, which, my takeaway is always your integrity and you're believable. Because you're not hiding it and you're consistently out there. That's who you are. You're consistently truthful and out there. You know what Ed Marx thinks. I wanted to ask you a little bit about what you're up to right now. Obviously, you write quite a bit. You have your podcasting. You're in partnership with people. You've created the Marx Advisory. You're a person who's very, I'll say, mission driven. What was the mission behind the Marx Advisory?
So it goes back to the mission that's been driving me in my career for many, many years, and it's very similar to yours, and it's to save lives. I knew at one point, and there's no time to unpack that story, but there was a definitive moment in my life and early in my career where I knew it was the intersection of tech and clinical coming together and boom, saving people's lives. And so I was focused on that. That's what drove me to become a CIO. And then when I think about scale, how do you reach some scale? Well, I can reach scale now by having my own advisory firm and working with multiple organizations and have a far bigger reach than I could ever being a CIO of a single health system. So it's really about that scale and learning. And plus, Gil, I think sometimes either the organizations where I serve, they either love me or they were ready for me to exit. And so now I'm my own boss. And so I don't have to worry about that. And it gives me a lot of freedom, right? To really be totally authentic, truthful to the people that I serve. And then, because I don't have to play politics, I don't have to play the political games, and I don't have to deal with the bureaucracy that you might have to sometimes when you belong to an organization. So I'm able to serve a lot of different companies. I'm able to speak and write and have those sorts of freedoms. So I'm really having the time of my life. I get to work with my wife a little bit more now. And so that's been a lot of fun and gratifying.
Yeah, it's amazing because you have all that clout and experience. When people think about the Marx Advisory, it's not you. It's sort of how we started this show, which is it's all the yous that come to the table. The CIO you, the CEO you,
Yeah.
the patient advocate you, the person who's been a leader in the health information sector, your relationships with many companies. I wanted to ask you not a tough question, but something that's been on my mind about our industry. You know, I don't know if I don't remember if you were at Vive or not in Nashville, which I think is the natural place for Vive. I think they should settle on Nashville. It's really the health provider system capital of the United States.
True.
But I'm watching the folks from whether it's AWS, Amazon Web Services, or Microsoft, or all of these mega companies on stage, really the aggregators of the action, I think. And then of course the tons of startups that are there or early stage companies. Do you think the startups and early stage companies have actually become the development laboratory for the behemoths? In other words, their attitude is, hey, let's stay away from the early stage ideas. Let's jump in when it kind of bubbles. And we think we could give it life, as opposed to our spending a ton of money running around after like a myriad of ideas. Let them do that. Let them raise the money for that. We'll jump in when we have to plunk down some real money and take it from there.
Yeah, I think that's a positive way of looking at it. I've seen it hurt some startups as well, right? Because what you have, and I agree, you have this ecosystem of, innovators, and because the behemoths, they're not going to focus too much on that. They've got other things going on. And so you let these innovators perk up and do all the heavy lifting, hard work. And then as they start to make a material difference, then they get, in the best case scenario, they sell, they have an exit. But in many cases, what happens is the behemoth might see what they're doing and decide to do that. So it's like, Amazon, people always pick on Amazon this way, right? Amazon, like, oh, come to Amazon, use our platform as your store. Well, Amazon tracks you. And if you're suddenly selling a bunch of widgets for X dollars, they're going to make their own widgets and have their Amazon brand for that widget. And I've seen that happen too. So that's sort of the downside there. So you have to be really careful. There's a very fine line.
That's a fascinating perspective, and only we would get that from you because you've been on the behemoth side in a way.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're the CIO of Cleveland Clinic, you're sitting with Microsoft and Epic and all these folks negotiating on the behalf of a mega system. And on the other hand, you've sat in as a CEO of a sort of a mid-sized company that you were working to bring to another level.
Yep.
They got a tremendous amount of bump visibility through your presence. I noticed that at, I think it was a health meeting or a Vive meeting at also, I think in Nashville. They were every place once you stepped in to sort of guide them. And now, of course, even with the Marx Advisory, I think that your brand has a positive impact on other companies. Anything you could share with us of you're working on right now that you say, hey, watch this company or watch that company, you think they're special?
Well, I always go for the heart, right? I don't want to serve with any sort of company. I always check out the heart first and make sure that there's alignment, right? Everyone's in it for the right reasons. The why, what's their why? And so I get a chance to serve with a couple companies like that. I mean, all my companies, there's a handful, there's about 10 different companies that I serve. And I think they're all in that genre of having sort of a good why behind them and a good heart. And so I always look for opportunities to really connect them. So recently, I took one of these companies and we went to the opening for the Houston Methodist has a brand new hospital, the most tech advanced hospital in the world as of right now. And I wanted them to walk through the halls. I wanted them to see patients. I wanted them to remember, why it is that they're providing the services that they're doing. And so now I'm doing more and more of that. So I'm bringing my clients and connecting them directly with these hospitals, inviting the whole hospital community. So we're doing this in multiple locations and just really sort of focusing on the heart. I hate to mention any names just because there's several of them.
You don't want to leave any of them out and offend anybody.
Right.
Okay.
But if they're working with me, I can guarantee you they've got the right heart. They're doing it for the right reasons, and that's what's most important to me. Because I don't want to help someone just succeed financially. Although I understand it's good to do, it's important. That's how we are able to live. But I think there's a careful balance, and I always always err on the heart side.
Good. I mean, look, that's important. That's very important. I think that heart and conscience are very, very important elements that companies often think are or the soft stuff of an enterprise, but actually it's the driving metric of knowing why we do what we do, and you've kept that really in focus. Along with Diagnose, you have a companion sort of booklet for clinicians, which is different. Usually people say, I've written the book, I'm done with it, now next. You felt important to have a companion booklet for these folks. Why?
Yeah, there were so many good things that we learned in all of our focus groups and things that Chris and I had already been doing and learned from others. So we thought, having it in one easy spot in a booklet would be super practical. And then there's 5 things, Gil, and 4 of them are free, because oftentimes people say, well, I would love to do that, but we have no budget. Well, guess what? It comes down to leadership in most cases. And here's 4 of the 5 are free to do. 1 of them costs money. So there's no excuse for any leader not to be leading patient experience, no matter what their role or title is.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, Ed, because I often find that when people have to enter the medical system, they feel a little bit like items on the shelf. Everything you do, all your counsel clearly is about making sure the system never forgets that we're sometimes patients, we're always people. Ed, it has been an absolute thrill and delight having you back on Health Unabashed. I want to thank you. I want to thank, of course, Greg Masters, who's our executive producer of the program. I hope to have you back again. I'm sure you have a lot of big things in the works right now, and I look forward to hearing about them.
Well, Gil, again, thank you so much. And you're lucky you get to work with the master.
Well said. Thank you.
And that wraps another powerful conversation here on Health Unabashed. A sincere thank you to our global audience for tuning in, and to our guest, Ed Marx, for his tireless drive for innovation and trailblazing leadership in digital health transformation. If you've ever wondered what healthcare can really achieve when digital transformation is done right, Ed Marx is the voice you've been waiting for. Be sure to explore his latest work and thought leadership at marxadvisory.com and follow him across platforms to stay current on digital health innovations and transformative leadership. Health Unabashed streams live on Healthcare Now Radio Monday through Friday, 10:30 a.m., 6:30 p.m., and 2:30 a.m. Eastern. That's 7:30 a.m., 3:30 p.m., and 11:30 p.m. Pacific. Want to stay connected? Follow Gil at Gil_Bashe and me, Greg Masters, MPH, on Twitter. It's Greg with 2 G's. Tag your insights and feedback using #HealthUnabashed. Until next time, keep listening, keep learning, and keep raising your voice with no apologies.